Alrighty. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our training this afternoon. Today, we are excited to have Golden Gate Regional Center here today to talk about an overview of the services available through the Regional Center. We will hear from Alicia Prather, Early Start Manager, Kelly Blankenship, Lanterman Act Intake Manager, and Jayashree Nathaniel, Lanterman Act Services Manager. We'll learn about what the regional centers have to offer through their Early Start and Lanterman Act services. First, for anyone who's new here, we want to briefly talk about the FRC and what we do here in San Mateo County. We serve families who have children with disabilities between the ages 0 to 22. We are staffed by parents and caregivers of children and young adults with disabilities, and we provide support, information, resources, and referrals to navigate the systems. We also offer monthly trainings, support groups, a resource binder, and a monthly newsletter. We are funded in part by the Department of Developmental Services, DDS, as well as the California Department of Education under the Special Education Division. I want to give a disclaimer that the FRC is not a legal services agency, and we cannot provide any legal advice. Any information provided by us should not be considered a means of taking the place of legal advice that must be obtained through an attorney. With that, we invite you all to connect with us, and we'll put our contact information in the chat. Next, we just want to go over some general housekeeping items to make sure our training runs smoothly. We will be recording this training to make available on our FRC video library. Sorry, excuse me. So we ask that you please mute yourself when not speaking to avoid any background noise, and please be respectful throughout this training. We are offering simultaneous interpretation in Spanish today. So if you'd like, if you haven't already, please select the language that you would like to listen to this presentation in. You can do this in the settings bar under the globe icon, or it says interpretation. You can select either English or Spanish. We ask that if you are listening in English, please still select English, as this will allow you to hear the interpreters translate from Spanish to English if needed. Go ahead, Patricia.
Muy buenas tardes por estar en este entrenamiento. Si ustedes están escuchando este entrenamiento, por favor, y seleccionen el idioma. En la parte del menú de abajo hay un icono con el globo que dice Interpretation. Seleccionen ese icono para que puedan escucharlo en español, donde dice Spanish. Y también pueden hacer el mute o poner en silencio el original audio para que no interfiera. So, si necesitan ayuda, pueden levantar la mano o poner en el chat que necesitan ayuda para que los podamos ayudar a poner en el salón que estén de habla española. Gracias.
Okay, thanks, Patricia. We are also offering live automated captions today. So if you'd like to view the captions, you can go again to your Zoom settings bar, find the CC icon, and click to show captions. We will have a Q&A portion at the end of the presentation. Please save your questions for the end, as we'll pause the recording. During that time, you can feel free to come off mute, use the raise hand feature or the chat box for questions and comments. We ask that you please not share any detailed information, and please keep your questions general to protect your privacy, as well as your time and our other participants' time as well. We have a large group today, so we want to make sure everyone has a chance to get their questions answered as well. After this training, we will send out a survey to collect your feedback on how the training went. The survey is anonymous and it lets us know how to improve our trainings for you all. And most importantly, allows us to continue providing these trainings for the community. And last, we will be sending a follow-up email tomorrow with all of the materials in this training. Okay, that's it for me, so I'll turn it over to GDRC. Thank you, everyone.
All right, thank you, Iris, and I want to thank Family Resource Center, whom we collaborate with, for organizing this. And thank you everybody who's joined today, and a good afternoon to you all. My name is Jayashree Nathaniel, and I am the manager over Regional Center Services. So that's the Lanterman over 3-year-old services with Golden Gate Regional Center. So to start us off, Golden Gate Regional Center has been supporting lives of liberty and opportunity in the San Francisco, San Mateo, and Marin counties since 1966. And these were established, the regional centers were established within the state of California to serve people that have developmental disabilities and their families. We can go to the next slide. Thank you. The Golden Gate Regional Center serves Marin County, San Francisco County, and San Mateo County. And GGRC was one of the first two regional centers to start in the state. We have come a long way, and now combined between the three counties, we serve a little over 10,000 individuals and families. And specifically in San Mateo County, we are serving close to 5,000 individuals and their families. So initially, regional centers were serving only people who had intellectual disabilities. And then in 1974, that was expanded to include individuals that are substantially disabled by cerebral palsy, epilepsy, or autism, along with those that had an intellectual disability. Within the state of California, there are 21 regional centers serving every county within the state. And so if you look at the entire state of California, there are regional centers covering the entire state. We can go to the next slide. So regional centers, specifically Golden Gate Regional Center, serves the entire span of somebody's life. So we have an early start that focuses primarily on infants and toddlers and go up to 36 months of age, close to 3 years old. And so early start is part C of the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. The IDEA is the federal special education law and covers infants and toddlers from birth through 36 months of age. So you'll hear in this presentation later more about the Early Start program and what it offers. But just to preface, in California, most infants and toddlers who qualify for Part C services served by the regional center. The local educational authority also provides services for infants and toddlers with solely low incidence disabilities, including deafness, blindness, or orthopedic disabilities. Together, these two pieces of the IDEA Part C form the Early Start program in California. We can go to the next slide. So going back to regional center services, in order to receive services from the Golden Gate Regional Center specifically, individuals must be residents of either San Francisco, San Mateo, or Marin counties. We have an office in each of these three counties to serve that county. And our San Mateo County office is located on Norfolk Street. And in order to receive services from our San Mateo County office, individuals would have to be residents of San Mateo County. Now, eligibility for regional center services is not based on income, legal status, or insurance. Regional center services are voluntary. So what that means is that the person, if they're an adult making their own decisions, or a legal guardian must want our services and may choose to decline our services. So that is something important to remember, that, social workers, when you are talking to social workers, they'll always ask, do you consent to this service? Do you wish to receive this service? So they are asking that because regional center services are voluntary, and we do need to know that. Now we can go to the next slide. At the regional center, we have bilingual staff available. So we have Spanish, Tagalog, Chinese, Arabic speaking staff available to work with families for whom English is not their primary language. And so you can request for that if you think that would be helpful and beneficial to you. We are also able to make arrangements to obtain translators for those who speak other languages than the ones that were mentioned here. And we are able to arrange for that as well. And so with that, I am going to hand it over to Alicia.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming. So I'm the manager of Early Start, which is one of the two programs here at the Regional Center for birth to age 36 months. I say 36 months on purpose because when we say 3 years old, sometimes people think it means all the way through the time a child is 3. But no, it's the 3rd birthday is when our program ends. So we can have the next slide, please. So here are the steps for applying or referring to Early Start. The first steps is referral and intake. Then we discuss the eligibility criteria. So to be eligible for Early Start, there's 2 pathways. One is a demonstrated delay of 25% or more in a developmental area, which we'll cover more later, and the other is different risk and high risk established risk areas. And we'll go over that in more detail later. So we assess for eligibility. So that means we're checking those risk factors or testing for the delays. And if a child is found eligible, we develop a service plan, the Individual Family Service Plan, or IFSP. And part of that discussion is what services are appropriate. And of course, that's going to depend on the child and the family and what's going on. Not everything works for every person or is appropriate. And lastly, we go through a transition period as we approach age 3 and decide what next steps are appropriate. Next slide, please. Great. So step 1. How do we make a referral? So you can call, you can fax, you can email or postal mail to us. An intake specialist will complete the intake screening with you, and anyone can make a referral. It can be parents, grandparents, it's often the pediatrician or the daycare center. Anyone can make a referral. And our referral form can be found on our website, www.ggrc.org. And be as specific as possible if you fill out that form with what your concerns are. That can really help speed things along and target our assessment process. If your child has diagnoses and you know it already, write them down. If you're worried that they're not walking as much as their friends who are the same age or talking as much, write that down. Okay. So once we get a completed referral, the case is assigned to one of our Early Start social workers at GGRC, and they will reach out to the family to set up an assessment. Various forms will be mailed and emailed with all sorts of information. This is a federal program, so this is part of special education, and we know the federal government likes its rules, so there's lots of information to share with you. Okay. And then our timeline for determining eligibility is 45 days from the receipt of a completed referral. So now we're going to go over in more detail some of the eligibility criteria. You can go to the next slide. So developmental delay. So this, some kids might already have a diagnosis, but they don't need to. This is when we're testing to see if there is a delay in development in the 5 developmental domains. So that's cognitive, how a child is learning. Physical, so this might be fine motor skills. It might be gross motor skills, crawling, walking. It might be vision and hearing. This is physical delays. Communication, both in how a child is speaking, maybe sign language, as well as how they're understanding what is communicated to them appropriate for their age. Social and emotional, how are these little ones interacting with their parents, their peers, their siblings? And then adaptive, how are they navigating the world around them and reacting to their environment? So establish risk for developmental disability. So established risk conditions have conditions, they come to us with medical records from their pediatrician or perhaps a specialist, where the conditions and diagnosis they have are known to cause developmental delays and disabilities. We already know that it's highly likely that these children will have a developmental delay or disability, and we don't need to wait to see that delay manifest. Okay, the next slide. Down syndrome is an example of that, and there are others. And then high risk is similar, and that has to be 2 or more of the following conditions, which are very medical, and I'm not going to read through them. Just some of the more common ones are prematurity of less than 32 weeks gestation, small for gestational age, prenatal exposure to various substances, things like that. Clinically significant failure to thrive. And these are defined by the law, and they're not something that we decided to make a list on. Okay? Additionally, an infant or toddler of somebody who is served by the regional center, if their mom or dad is already served by the regional center, that is considered high risk. And they can, even if that child is not demonstrating any delays or known diagnoses, we can have them be part of early start as long as parents consent. Okay. So what a developmental delay cannot be based on is a temporary physical disability. If a child unfortunately broke their arm and they can't write very well at age level or color or whatnot, then they're not delayed. They're temporarily unable to do something because of that injury. So cultural and economic factors, the normal process of learning a second language, that's not a speech delay if your English is stronger than your Spanish, right? That's just, when you're learning more than one language, you're going to have different levels in each language. And then also similarly, any manifestations and with dialects and social linguistic, excuse me, variances. Next slide, please. Lots of words, I know. So to be assessed, it's a process. First and foremost, a consent for assessment must be signed by a parent. Since Early Start is an educational program, the person who signs all of our documents must have what's called the educational rights. And that is different than medical rights. It's its own special legal rights. And it's always held by the legal parents. And it's only taken away. It's the last thing. If someone's losing custody of their child, it's the last thing that goes away. So if a child is in foster care and a foster parent has the medical rights, we still would need to contact the biological parent in order to have them sign off on all of our different forms, starting with a consent for assessment. In lieu of that, we would need a recorded family court order from the County Court of San Mateo, Family Court, to proceed. Okay. And this goes, we have all sorts of families where parents might be, maybe they're deployed, maybe they're incarcerated, and kids are living with an auntie or grandma, and we're going to have to figure out a way to get the appropriate signatures for educational rights that way. We just can't proceed. Okay, but if we get through that and we get our consent for assessment, the eligibility is determined by a team of 2 or more professionals. Usually that is the Early Start social worker +1. It might be +2 or +3. Who is that +1? Oftentimes it's a speech language pathologist. It might be a doctor, a nurse, a physical therapist, an occupational therapist. Then if a child is found eligible for Early Start, that's when we develop a service plan. The next slide, please. So part of the service plan is that we're focusing on the family and the needs of the family and the child. So we want to know the child's strengths. We want to know what's going on in this child's life. And then we're discussing very closely with the family what their concerns are. It shouldn't be led by us. This child has a speech delay, they must need speech therapy. That might not be the immediate priority of a family in that moment. All sorts of things might be going on. A family might be looking for housing. A family might be, mom might be returning to work and needs to find childcare. So we're going to try and work within that more holistic picture to try and get services in place as best as we can, based on families' concerns about their child's development and their priorities of the family situation in the moment. We also work with families to develop outcomes. What is it that you want your child to be able to do? It might be as simple as, I want him to talk as much as his cousin who's the same age, or it might be very different. That is a conversation we have with the family. We can go to the next slide, please. So one of the regulations we have to adhere to is trying to provide services in the natural environment as much as possible. A natural environment is legally defined by the law as a setting where natural or typical an environment that is natural and typical for this aged child, whether or not they have a disability. So we're trying to avoid all kids going to a clinic where everyone in the community knows that that child has a delay of some sort. We want it to be more holistic and in the natural environment. A lot of times that's at home. That might be in daycare. That can be at parks. Some of our vendors have services that are embedded in other daycares. So there's all sorts of kids running around all the time, just part of the community. And then our IFSPs are reviewed every 6 months to check in on, has the family's concerns changed? How's progress going with the services? And a family can choose where they want to have these meetings. It can be at home. We'll come on out. It can be at daycare. It can be on Zoom. It can be on the telephone. And then in between these 6 months service plan updates, we do quarterly check-ins, which tend to be a more quick telephone call. Okay, so next slide, please. And just a reminder, you guys all know this, that parents and caregivers are the most important part of the team. They participate to the fullest extent possible with their work schedules, and other kids might need their attention too in the family, because they're going to be learning along with their child. If the speech therapist comes into your home for an hour a week, that's just 1 hour. But if you're participating and spying a little bit and taking notes, you can continue those lessons throughout that child's day. You know, use tips and tricks at dinner time and at bath time to have that child talk more, or whatever the therapy is about. So one thing that we are not is we aren't the school. We don't take your child and do something over here with them and then give them back to you. So that's why parent and caregiver participation is mandatory in Early Start. And then also, some of our kids respond very quickly to the services and just kind of blossom like a flower in the springtime, and they might leave Early Start ahead of schedule because they've graduated, they've nailed it, they've reached age level. Okay, so next slide, please. So what does it cost? There's no cost for eligibility and assessment. If a child is found eligible, there's no cost for any further evaluations that our clinical team might recommend further testing. Any services that our clinical team recommends, you have to check to see if you can get that through your health insurance. So that can take a long time. So we will put in temporary funding while you check to see if your health insurance covers it or not. If they don't, we'll continue the funding. If they do, we'll transition the services over to your health insurance. Unfortunately, this almost always means it's going to be with a different therapist, and there's nothing we can do about that. If your health insurance, if you have a deductible, if you have co-pays, if you have co-insurance, GGRC can reimburse you after the fact. Okay. Once your child is eligible, any insurance services that happen after that, that are ones that we said they need, and we can reimburse them. But that does mean a family will have to pay that money up front. Then every few months, we have a reimbursement coordinator who will work with families to get reimburse that amount. Same thing as sometimes insurance companies will only do 15 sessions of speech therapy, for example. Once that runs out, we can take over that service. And it will be with a different therapist, almost certainly. Okay, next slide, please. And then lastly, I wanted to talk about transition because we get so many questions about transition. What is transition? It is a gradual process. It's not just one event. It's a series of different steps leading up to the third birthday. Some of those steps are initiated by the early start social worker. Others need to be done by the educational authority. That's usually the school district. And some steps are completed by GGRC, but our intake and assessment department for Lanterman and provisional eligibility. Next slide, please. So when do these steps begin? They start right away, and that as soon as a family comes to us, we're saying, hey, we're glad you're here, and this program ends at age 3. So we're trying to make sure families understand that it's not a forever program. The formal planning per the regulations can start as early as 27 months of age. We tend to start at 30 months of age because we have regularly scheduled meetings then anyway. Next slide, please. So part of transition is that we have a transition planning conference. This is scheduled between the family and the early start social worker. We ask the school districts for your particular address, if they can come. Many of them have preset times that they want to try to meet, and we will ask a family if they can meet during that time. But if a family can't make that time, then the meeting is going to go ahead, and it's going to be between the early starts social worker and the family, and we'll invite the school district, and hopefully they can attend at that time. A family can also say, no, thank you, I don't want the school district to come, but we still have to meet with them. GGRC still must meet with them and explain the steps ahead towards transition. Okay, next slide, please. So what happens at these conferences? Well, the early start social worker talks about what to expect with the end of early start. We gave a quick overview of Lanterman Act services, and we have the school district explain their IEP process. That might include letting families know they're going to need to provide a birth certificate and a PG&E bill to prove residency in a district, but that's the school district's part. If the school district can't come or the family doesn't want them to come, then the GGRC early start social worker will give a general overview of the process. We ask families what their concerns are. It's kind of scary to think your child is leaving a program that you're familiar with and having to go to the school. So we talk about that, try to work out some plans there. And really importantly, we encourage families to sign a release of information for the school district so that we can provide the school district with our early start IFSPs, evaluations, all of the paperwork. So the school has a head start on assessing a child for services after age 3. After the transition planning conference, we write up all of everything we discussed, and we have everyone who participated sign it. And while early start ends on the 3rd birthday, no matter what, So an important thing to remember is if the school district is behind in their assessments, early start doesn't continue past the third birthday. And we have no control over any of our school districts if they're behind. Next slide, please. So the notification of the potentially eligible is another requirement under the law that GGRC notifies all the school districts that are for all the children in early start based on their address. The local school district must be notified no later than 90 days before the third birthday. So counting backwards from the third birthday. And we send that out in a batch of birthday months. For example, this week, yesterday, we sent out for all the kids who are turning 3 in June, we sent out all the information to the appropriate school district. There's no way for a family to ask us not to do that. We are required by law to do that. But the only information we share with those letters is the basic contact information that says your child's in the program. It doesn't say they're in the program because of this delay or that disability, not at all. And the school districts, the LEA, is required to respond to all of these notifications. So if, as a parent or caregiver, you want to go through the IEP process, but you don't want GGRC to share any of the early start records, that's okay. This letter still goes out, and the school district needs to contact you and start the appropriate assessment from scratch without any records from us. But I have to say, I really encourage any parents who are listening to sign that release. Okay, next slide. And then lastly, we have, and we can make an internal referral for Lanterman assessment. As part of transition, our early start social workers give a general overview of what Lanterman is, and we ask parents to sign whether or not they want their child to be assessed. This is to make sure that parents are informed of their rights to an assessment. Okay. If a family says, no, I don't want my child assessed, but then changes their mind tomorrow, we'll give them a new form. We'll tear up the old one. They can change their mind and we'll proceed accordingly. So if the family says, yes, please assess my child, we initiate an internal referral to Lanterman assessment. And this is all part of transition. So a decision regarding Lanterman eligibility should be made by the third birthday. An important thing to remember, if a child is found eligible for Lanterman Act services, early start services will still end on the third birthday, no matter what. Okay. And I think that's the last slide for me. Yes.
I don't think we had anyone to talk about this slide. It's more about the Family Resource Center. Should we just move on to the next slide?
Sure, sounds good.
So my name is Kelly Blankenship, and I'm the manager of intake and assessment. So I'm going to talk to you about the Lanterman ongoing services for age 3 and over. So next slide, please. Okay, so for the referral, the first step is the referral and intake, and referral for Lanterman services is different. It does need to come from the legally responsible person or from the adult. So we don't accept outside referrals because we do need the consent of the person being referred. So it's a little bit different than the early start services, and it does require parental consent for the person who has parental rights as opposed to educational rights, which is who signs off for early start services. So we'll go ahead and talk about the eligibility criteria, the assessment process, and then I'll turn it over to Jay Cherie to talk about services. So you want to go to the next slide? Okay, so a referral can be made by calling our toll-free number, which is on our website. You can fax, you can email, you can mail. An intake specialist will call and complete the phone screening. For that, again, we do need to speak with a legal guardian or with the adult themselves if it's an adult who's applying. If they're unable to initiate contact, we can sometimes take the referral information from a third party, but we would not move forward without that person's consent. Additionally, once we've gone through the intake and the intake has been reviewed, then an application and consent forms are sent to the family to fill out. When those are returned, then we assign an assessment social worker who will guide the family through the assessment process. If families do need help to fill out the form, they are welcome to contact me and we will assign assessment social worker to help them fill out the application. So that's included in the letter that goes out with the application. So you can go to the next page. We do send out applications in Spanish, English, and Chinese. So who is eligible for the regional center? So you can go to the next slide. So there's 4 main categories that make people qualify for the regional center. The first one is an intellectual disability. So that is an IQ of 70 or below. And we'll go over, first you have to have one of the disabilities, and then there's other criteria that we look at. The second area is cerebral palsy, which is a neurological disorder that appears in infancy or early childhood and permanently affects body movement and muscle coordination, but does not worsen over time. It is caused by abnormalities in parts of the brain that control muscle movements. So you can go to the next slide. Epilepsy, which is a neurological condition in which a person has repeated seizures over time. So it has to be not treated with medication. So if somebody has epilepsy, but it's fully treated and they're no longer having breakthrough seizures, then they would not qualify for that. Also, we accept under autism. And the final category is called conditions closely related to intellectual disability, which does not include conditions that are solely psychiatric, solely a learning disability, or solely physical in nature. Okay, you can go to the next slide. The disability, in addition to having one of those 4 categories, the disability has to have started before the age of 18. So when we do have adults who contact intake, we do ask them to provide some information showing that they were having difficulties before the age of 18. For example, they can provide transcripts showing that they were in special education. They can provide reports that were done, documenting their disability before the age of 18. The disability also has to be likely to continue indefinitely. And it has to constitute a substantial disability in 3 out of the areas of major life activity. So those areas are self-care, receptive and expressive language, learning, mobility, and self-direction for children. And for adults, we also look at capacity for independent living and economic self-sufficiency. So those last 2 we only look at for adults because that's very difficult to tell in a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old how they will do as an adult. Yeah, so that's the first. So there's also, it says on here, this does not come up very often anymore, but if there's individual at risk of having a child with a developmental disability, they may be eligible for referral for a genetic diagnosis or counseling or other prevention services. Again, that doesn't happen very often since most insurances cover that, but that is something else that we could potentially provide. Okay, next slide, please. So there is another category that has just been added in the last 3 or 4 years. So this is only for children under the age of 5. So we have been looking at this currently for 3 people who are 3 or 4 years old up until age 4.5. So for this one, you don't necessarily have to have a disability. You don't have to have a diagnosis, but you have to have be significant functional limitations in at least 2 of the 5 areas that we discussed before. So for children who are eligible under that category, they will have to be reassessed at the age of 5. So it's just a little transition between early start and the age of 5, because sometimes it's hard to tell with a 3-year-old or 3.5-year-old if their difficulties are likely to be lifelong conditions. So this gives a little more time for the child to grow and to get a better idea of how they're going to be doing long term. Okay, next one, please. So once we've received the complete referral where we have all the information documenting that there are concerns, then an application and consent forms are filled out. Once those are received back, then we assign an assessment social worker. We have assessment social workers who speak Spanish and Cantonese and Toisanese. And we also use interpreters for other languages that we don't have social workers that speak. Once the application is filled out and the social worker is assigned, then the social worker will meet with the family, do a social assessment and meet the applicant. And then they will ask the family to sign release of information forms, and they will gather documentation from the schools, from the doctors, from other people who may have done assessments. Next page, please. Once the records have been received, then the applicant will be assessed by a team. Most of the times it is with a psychologist, and then the team will gather together and have an internal case review with a doctor, a psychologist, and a social worker to determine eligibility. So we have a 120-day timeline to complete the entire assessment process from the date the intake is completed until a decision is made. Next slide, please. Okay, Jayshree.
Thank you, Kelly. So with that, we come to the Lanterman services, which is over the age of 3. And once somebody is made eligible for Lanterman services, that's where the first step would be that a social worker would be assigned, an ongoing social worker would be assigned. And the social worker would reach out to the family and let them know that they are assigned. And the first step after that is to schedule an individual program plan meeting. So that is really a person-centered plan. Just like with the early start, there would be a IFSP. So with the Lanterman, it's called the IPP. And you might be familiar with the school, it's called an IEP. So this is an IPP, individual program plan, that the social worker would schedule. And this is a very important plan because it documents all the strengths, the capabilities, the needs of the individual, what they would like to, what your child would like to achieve in the next 3 to 5 years, what your adult family member would like to achieve in their life, because it's important to share all that information at the IPP meeting so that the social worker can document all of that. And why it's important is because all the services that the regional center provides are guided by the person-centered plan, by the IPP. So you want to make sure that those choices, those wishes are documented in the plan, so then the services could be funded accordingly with that. We can go to the next slide. So the individual program plan, or the IPP, documents, as I said, long-term goals and outcomes of the individual's future. And this is where, you can invite anybody to the individual program plan meeting that you choose. If it's a child, the parents would generally be there. If it's an adult individual who is an adult, makes their own decision, they have the freedom to invite whomever they would like to their individual program plan meeting. And that's where, it's important. Sometimes family members, you as parents, as relatives of the individual, are able to share what are some outcomes that would really help the person live meaningful life, contribute meaningfully. And so all of that is documented. The social worker is usually facilitating that meeting. So, they'll go over the areas that cover all of the individual's plan and make those documentation. And then the services would be related to that. So then there are some short-term objectives. So there'll be a long-term goal, like in the next 3 years or next 5 years, this is what I want to achieve. And then there'll be shorter objectives to reach that big long-term goal. So those are also discussed at the IPP meeting. The IPP meeting also clarifies, the social worker will clarify the roles and responsibilities, who will be funding, who the funding source would be, and the services that a consumer can expect from the regional center community program. And while talking about funding sources, I do want to point out that regional center services for Lanterman, we are the pairs of last resort. So social workers will often ask questions if that particular service is something that maybe the insurance would fund for, or maybe it's an educational service that the school would be responsible for. So those are all generic services in the community. So the social worker will be asking if you have access to those or not, and then make that determination where the regional center will come in and fund for those services. We can go to the next slide, please. So the short-term objectives, as we talked about, mainly the focus is in these 5 areas. So they're talking about the health and well-being, and health-wise, what's going on and what might be needed long-term. Is there insurance to cover health services? If not, what else can be done? So those would be the discussions in that area. The home situation would again reflect what's going on at the home, what are some supports that might be needed at home. For instance, parents might be working and a child is back from school and needs that supervision. So maybe, the parents will say, you as parents will say that it would be good to have daycare funding. So, things like that, if those are shared, and the social worker will also ask questions to assess and make sure that if there are any services that might be able to come under regional center funding. Then the other area that social workers will talk about is, for the school portion of it. If they are school aged, then what's going on in school? Are they full-time in school? Do they need additional supports there? Is there something we can do? If they are graduated from school, then do they need a day program? And so then, our social workers will make the referrals, will follow up and find a day program for them. If the person is interested in working, then, making those connections with the Department of Rehabilitation, or helping them learn those skills. We do fund, regional centers fund independent living services. So that's something that can also be discussed. Then transportation, what are the issues there? Can the person take transportation on their own? Is public transportation an option? If not, then what are the other avenues? So that's the discussion in that area. And any other area that's not covered under these can be discussed as well. Respite is one of our very popular service that we fund to give a temporary break to parents taking care of individuals with developmental disabilities. So, respite or social recreational activities, or anything else that is not covered in any of the other categories can be discussed at this point. The individual, as I mentioned, can invite people to the IPP meeting as they choose. The individual, the GGRC social worker, and their team members meet at least annually. So we have at Golden Gate Regional Center, we do an IPP, individual program plan meeting, once every 3 years. In between those 3 years, we have annual meetings. So at least annually, the social worker will be reaching out to you. If you need more, if somebody needs more than that, if things have changed now, suddenly, there is a need for a different kind of service, please reach out to the social worker so they can follow up accordingly on that. It's not just that we meet with individuals and families once a year. It's as needed, as you would need. Now our GGRC social workers are also required to see everybody at least once a year in person. So they will be asking you that question, can we meet in person? Can I see you in person? And if you choose that you don't want that for whatever reason, let the social worker know, and they can work on that. You can go to the next slide, please. So what are some of the services that the regional center would fund? There is a variety, and it's an exhaustive list, but some of the more popular ones: adaptive equipments like, strollers, adult day programs, advocacy and case management is definitely one of the biggest service that our GGRC social workers provide when they are overseeing all of your services, your needs, and also if there is a need to reach out, say something is not, for instance, something is not working out with the school and you need that additional support, you can let the social worker know, and the social workers are able to assist with that, or they will find avenues to help with that. And then there's behavior intervention programs available. We have community living options available. There are children's residential as well as adult residential facilities available if somebody wants to explore that. Daycare funding, as I mentioned previously, is also available for parents that are working and their children if they need supervision at home while parents are working. Independent living skills training to teach those skills to live independent, to be able to live independently. Some of our individuals have that goal. They want to learn how to budget. They want to learn how to grocery shop, how to navigate the community, or whatever it be that will help them be more independent. So those are available. Now, in terms of our services, we follow two models. So there is that traditional model where we would go through our vendors. All regional centers have vendors that are vendored with us to provide all these different kinds of services. So under the traditional model, you'll meet with your social worker, have the IPP, whatever services are determined are needed. The social worker will find vendors that are vendored with the regional center to provide that service. Now we have another model of providing services that is available to everybody now, and that's called the self-determination program. So the self-determination program allows everybody the opportunity to have more control in developing their service plans, selecting service providers to better meet the needs of their needs that they would have. So, so this is another avenue to receive services that is available. If you are interested in more information on self-determination, I can send our Family Resource Center our website and the Department of Developmental Services website. You can access that. But if you're interested, the first step would be to let your social worker know that I am interested in the self-determination program. Now, from there, the next step is that you would be sent information to attend a mandatory orientation on self-determination. The orientations are provided by the State Council of Developmental Disabilities. And so you would have to go and, well, I think it's virtual option as well. So you would attend that orientation and then you will receive a certificate. So once you have received that certificate that you have attended the orientation, you'll send that to your social worker. And then your social worker will walk you through the next steps of that. The next steps after that would be to have a person-centered plan. So what would be the plan, you know, to under self-determination, what would be your plan, or what would be the individual's plan, what all they want to include in the plan. And then accordingly, a budget is created, a spending plan is created. So the social worker is able to walk you through all of those later on steps. But the first step really is to let the social worker know if you're interested, and then to attend that mandatory orientation, which is the next step after that. So the social worker can provide information to you on that if you're interested. And so that is just another model of being able to access regional center services, where you don't have to go through one of our vendors. And we know that sometimes vendors can be limited, the resources in the community can be limited. So this self-determination just allows you that further freedom to go and choose people in the community or agencies in the community that might not be vendored with the regional center to provide you that service for the individual. So we can go to the next slide, please. And continuing on the services, there's respite, supported employment, supported living services for those who live independently in their own apartments or their own home, and then transportation services. Now, there used to be a fee required for selected services through the annual family program and the family cost participation for kids below 21, but that has since been repealed. So that is not in effect anymore. And we can go to the next slide, please. And with that, I think we come to our contact information. So this is the contact information for referral. So this would go to Kelly's team if there is a referral for eligibility or early start referrals as well. So there's that information, and I'm sure you'll have access to that later on as well. And then the next slide is just listing our 3 offices and the address and the phone number and fax number for each of our offices. San Mateo County is listed at the end. We are located at 1900 South Norfolk Street and in San Mateo. And then go to the next slide. I think we're done with slides. So before we end, I just want to mention one thing. Regional Center, especially Golden Gate Regional Center, has a great collaboration with our Family Resource Center. So so I just definitely want to mention that and say that, you know, our Family Resource Center has been providing amazing, diligent work to our community. They're there to offer parent-to-parent support or help with parents, families, and children. If you're looking at locating, you know, you need services in the community and you need help with that, or information on, you know, IEPs or maybe community services such as in-home services or medical services, or even, you know, information about Social Security benefits. Our Family Resource Center has been great. They provide case management. They have binders available of all resources, and you know, I'm very happy that we have a good collaboration with our Family Resource Center. And I'm sure you could, if you have more questions on that, you could reach out to maybe Patricia Grudo, the FRC supervisor, and you could get that information as well. And there's a website is listed on this slide as well. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Jayashri. I'll take this time to pause for questions, and I see some in the chat, so give me 1 second. Sounds good. Thank you so much, everyone, for your questions and your engagement. Thank you so much to Alicia, Kelly, and Jayashri from GGRC. We really appreciate your time and your sharing of knowledge this afternoon. Thank you so much to our interpreters, Tony and Yenny, for all your hard work this evening. And we'll see you at our next training. Thank you, everyone. Have a great night.